never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. My life was pretty standard: decent job, a pleasant home, and a wife named Jessica who was, by all accounts, the love of my life. We had a good run, about 5 years of marriage filled with laughter, the occasional spat, and a shared vision for the future. But lately I'd sensed something off. Little things, you know. Jessica had become more distant, her phone was always face down, and she had been spending more time out with her best friend, Sarah. I dismissed it at first as my own insecurities, but there's only so much intuition can be ignored. The first real red flag that something was wrong came a few months ago when Sarah stopped visiting. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe Sarah got busy with her own life. So I let it slide. But one weekend, I casually mentioned Sarah during dinner, and that's when Jessica snapped at me. "Why don't you ask her yourself?" she retorted, her voice dripping with irritation. I was taken aback. They had been inseparable for years, and suddenly Jessica was acting as if Sarah was. The problem? That comment stuck with me. I could see it in Jessica's eyes, a flicker of something that didn't sit right. The next few weeks passed in a blur of tension. I noticed Jessica had new habits. She was out more nights than she was home, claiming it was for self-care or girl time. I laughed it off at first as just her being quirky, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't suspicious. One evening, I was scrolling through our shared computer when I stumbled across something that changed everything. I wasn't looking for trouble, but there it was, a series of messages between Jessica and someone named Mark. My heart raced as I read through their conversations. They were flirty, intimate, suggesting that they had been meeting up without my knowledge. My stomach dropped. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. That was the moment the world as I knew it shattered. This wasn't just a girlfriend's gossip, this was betrayal. I felt anger, but also sadness. I couldn't just confront her without proof, so I started to pay closer attention. I staked out, followed her a couple of times, and that only confirmed my fears. Seeing her sitting in a restaurant, laughing and leaning in toward Mark like she'd forgotten I existed was more than I could bear. I'll never forget the moment I decided enough was enough. I called her out that night. She came home late, smelling like cheap perfume that wasn't hers. I confronted her the second she walked through the door. "Who the hell is Mark?" I demanded, my heart racing. Jessica froze, her expression changing from shock to anger in a heartbeat. "What are you talking about?" she snapped, her defensive tone immediately dismissing my concerns. I laid it all out: the texts, the late nights, the lies. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd break down and confess. Instead, she doubled down, playing the victim. "You're being paranoid. You always think the worst of me." In that moment, I was crushed. All the love I had for her felt like it was being stripped away piece by piece. Her excuses were like daggers. She went on about how I was suffocating her, how she needed space. It was hard to comprehend how she could twist the narrative like that. I felt like I was losing my mind. Tears streamed down my cheeks, not just from anger but from a deep, gut-wrenching sadness. This woman, who I thought I knew inside and out, was a total stranger standing before me. How could we go from planning a future together to this? I felt betrayed, humiliated, and utterly alone. After the confrontation, I sat in silence, my mind racing. What was I going to do? I realized I couldn't just let this go. I needed to take action. I needed to feel in control after everything that had unraveled. I knew I had to gather more evidence, find out who this Mark was and how deep their connection ran. But more importantly, I needed to figure out my next move, a plan that would leave Jessica and her betrayal reeling. I had no idea how I would execute it, but I was determined to not be the victim in this story. I was going to turn this around, and I would make sure she felt the weight of her actions. After that night, I felt like I was living in a fog. I knew I couldn't just ignore what I had learned. I couldn't even look at Jessica without feeling a mix of anger and betrayal. Every time I glanced at her, I saw the woman who had promised to love me, to stand by my side through thick and thin, and yet here she was, lying and sneaking around. It was maddening. I decided that I needed to know more about Mark. I spent several nights quietly gathering information, piecing together fragments of Jessica's life that I had previously overlooked. It felt like being a detective in a crime thriller, except the crime was my marriage, and I was the one left reeling from the fallout. I looked through her social media, scouring her messages and pictures for any clues. Eventually, I found Mark's profile, a fitness enthusiast with a perfectly chiseled jaw and a penchant for flashy selfies. He was handsome, charming, and most importantly, a stranger to me. I dug deeper. I wanted to learn everything about him. I found out they had mutual friends, which made it all the worse. I felt like I was trapped in a web of deceit spun by the woman I thought I knew. One evening, while Jessica was out with friends, I decided to pay Mark a visit. I didn't confront him right away. I wanted to see him in his natural habitat. I followed him to a bar downtown, where I watched from a distance as he mingled with friends, laughing and enjoying life. I had a plan forming in my mind. I needed to gather evidence that would leave no room for doubt, something that would force Jessica to face reality. I started taking pictures of him, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of anger each time I clicked the shutter. This guy was the embodiment of betrayal, and he had no clue he was about to get caught in the crossfire of my revenge. The more I observed him, the more I realized how comfortable he seemed in our circle. I knew it wouldn't be long before I confronted both him and Jessica. The next step in my plan was straightforward but risky. I invited some friends over, orchestrating it to include Jessica's closest friends, including Sarah. I figured if I could gather them, I could create a scenario where the truth would come out. I needed to corner Jessica, force her to confront her lies not just in front of me but in front of people who cared about her. As the evening rolled around, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. I set up drinks and snacks, trying to appear casual while my heart pounded in my chest. When Jessica walked through the door, her face lit up at the sight of our friends. I could see her relax. She had no idea the storm brewing beneath the surface. After a couple of hours filled with laughter and conversation, I felt the time was right. I casually brought up Mark, mentioning how I had seen him out recently. Jessica's demeanor changed instantly. She tensed up, her eyes darting around as she tried to gauge the room. "Oh, Mark, he's just a friend," she said, her voice laced with forced casualness. I pressed on, "Yeah, a friend who texts you late at night and seems to have taken Sarah away from you." The room fell silent. Jess shot me a look of pure panic, but I didn't let it go. "He's more than just a friend, isn't he? And Sarah knows something too." The tension thickened as the truth began to sink in among our friends. Jessica's face blanched, and you could almost hear the gears turning in her mind as she scrambled for a comeback. "You're being ridiculous. This is just a joke, right?" She stuttered, but I could see the cracks forming. I glanced at Sarah, who was now looking between us with wide eyes. "Sarah, you've been spending time with Jessica. What's going on?" I directed the question at her. She opened her mouth to respond but hesitated. It was clear she was caught off guard. "Jess, I thought you were being honest with everyone," Sarah finally said cautiously. "You've been acting different lately and I didn't want to pry." Jessica's facade was crumbling and I relished it. It felt good to see her squirm, to know that the truth was finally starting to seep through the cracks of her lies. The room felt heavy with unspoken words, and I decided I needed to push just a little more. "Jessica," I said, looking her straight in the eye, "this isn't a joke. I know about you and Mark. The texts, the late nights, it's all out in the open now." The room erupted into gasps and murmurs as my words hung heavily in the air. Jessica's expression shifted from panic to rage. "You've been spying on me. You're unbelievable," she shouted, her voice dripping with venom. It was a moment I had waited for, but it didn't feel like a victory. Instead, I felt a deep pit of sorrow growing inside me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about the end of a life I had believed in, a life I once cherished. I had turned a corner and there was no going back. The emotional weight of the confrontation was overwhelming, but I was on a mission. I wanted to make sure she understood the consequences of her actions. It was time to deliver the final blow and put everything on the table. I needed her to see that her choices had irrevocably changed our lives, and I was prepared to do whatever it took to ensure she faced that reality. As Jessica's anger boiled over, the tension in the room reached its breaking point. I could see the disbelief etched on the faces of our friends, and it made me feel both vindicated and hollow. I had exposed the truth, but the emotional fallout was suffocating. You don't get to turn this around on me. I shouted back, my voice steady despite the chaos inside. You're the one who's cheating. You're the one lying to everyone. Jessica's face turned beet red. She was furious, but I could also see the shame flickering in her eyes. You've always been so controlling. I needed freedom. She yelled, desperately trying to redirect the blame. You don't understand what it's like to feel trapped. My friends were silent, taking in the scene as if they were watching a train wreck. Sarah looked like she was ready to intervene, but I shook my head slightly, urging her to let it play out. This was between me and Jessica, and I wanted her to face her betrayal head-on. You think you needed freedom, I said, my voice low and steady. What about the vows we made? What about the life we built together? The weight of my words hung in the air, and I could see the realization dawning on Jessica. She hadn't just betrayed me, she'd betrayed everything we had worked for. In a moment of vulnerability, she faltered. I didn't want it to come to this, she said, her voice breaking. She looked lost, a mixture of regret and defiance swirling in her expression. It was clear she was grappling with the enormity of what she had done, but the anger was still bubbling beneath the surface. Didn't want what to get caught, I shot back. You went behind my back and threw everything away for some thrill with Mark. You made your choices, Jessica. You made this mess. Our friends shifted uncomfortably, unsure of how to respond. I could see Sarah's eyes darting between us, clearly torn about how to navigate the emotional minefield. I appreciated her loyalty, but this was my battle to fight. Jessica took a deep breath and attempted to regain her composure. This is insane. You're making me look like the bad guy in front of everyone. You don't know what I've been through. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to betray your husband. I countered, my anger flaring again. What did you think I wouldn't find out? You thought you could just play house with Mark and I'd be none the wiser. Finally, Sarah spoke up, her voice trembling. Jessica, you need to tell him the truth. You can't just keep running. I was grateful for Sarah's support, but Jessica was too far gone in her defensiveness. Why are you all acting like I'm the villain here? She cried, her voice rising again. I needed something more. You can't expect me to be happy all the time. I felt the air thicken as Jessica's words hit home. The accusations were painful, but they also struck a chord of truth. Had I put too much pressure on her? Had I been so focused on my own expectations that I had neglected her needs? But I quickly pushed those thoughts away. This was not the time for introspection. The night dragged on, a whirlwind of harsh words and exposed secrets. Jessica's facade was falling apart, and I could see the cracks deepening with every accusation she hurled at me. The group slowly began to disperse as the tension became unbearable. Friends left one by one, unsure of how to ease the emotional turmoil that had erupted. When it was just the two of us left, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. This wasn't over, it was just beginning. You need to understand something, Jess, I said softly but firmly. I'm not going to be the one who stands by while you destroy everything we've built. You want freedom, then you can have it, but know that I'm not going to play the fool anymore. Jessica stared at me, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and realization. What are you saying? She whispered, a tremor in her voice. I'm saying I won't be your backup plan. You want to go off with Mark? Then do it. But don't expect me to sit here and wait for you to come back when you're done playing house. I'm done being your safety net. I could see the fear in her eyes. It was a mixture of dread and something else. Was it regret? I didn't know. All I knew was that I couldn't allow myself to be in this kind of limbo any longer. Jessica opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. No more lying, no more excuses. If you want to be with him, then go. But don't think I'm going to let you have your cake and eat it too. With that, I turned and walked away, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. I was done being the victim in this scenario. I needed to reclaim my life, and if that meant letting her go, then so be it. I spent the next few days in a haze of emotions. I felt a strange mix of relief and heartache. I was finally standing up for myself, but the thought of losing Jessica was still gut-wrenching. I knew I had to stick to my guns, though. I couldn't let her manipulation pull me back in. I began to think about the future, what I would do next if she followed through on her decision to leave. As I pondered my next steps, I realized it was time to reach out to Mark. I needed to confront him directly and deliver a message that would resonate with both him and Jessica. It was time to make my intentions clear, not just for her, but for myself. I wasn't going to let their affair dictate my life any longer. After everything that had unfolded, I felt the need to confront Mark directly. I couldn't let this go. Without a word, I needed to make sure he understood the gravity of his actions. It wasn't just Jessica who had betrayed me. He had crossed a line too. I couldn't let him think he could waltz into my life and take what was mine without facing the consequences. I decided to gather as much information as I could. I had done my homework, and I knew where Mark frequented. I had seen him at the bar a few times, so I figured that would be the best place to find him. I wasn't going to sneak around like a coward. I needed to confront him head-on. The following Friday, I made my way to the bar, a knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach. I pushed through the door, scanning the room for Mark. It didn't take long to spot him, leaning against the bar, surrounded by friends, laughing and enjoying the atmosphere. He looked like a king in his little kingdom, blissfully unaware of the storm coming his way. Taking a deep breath, I marched up to him. My heart raced, but I couldn't afford to show any weakness. I needed to be strong to exude confidence, even if I felt anything but. "Mark," I said, my voice cutting through the noise of the crowd. He turned, a puzzled look crossing his face. "Yeah, can I help you?" he asked, casually sipping his drink. "I think we need to talk," I stated flatly, trying not to let my anger seep into my tone. The smirk on his face faded as he sized me up. "About what?" "About Jessica," I replied, watching as his eyes widened slightly. "You know, my wife. Your wife." He echoed, feigning surprise but unable to hide the slight smirk that crept back onto his face. "I thought you two were having some issues." "Cut the crap, Mark. We both know what's going on." I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. "You think you can just swoop in and take what's mine without any consequences?" For a moment, it felt like the entire bar had gone quiet, and I could sense everyone straining to listen. The tension was palpable, and I relished the attention, the power I felt for the first time in weeks. Mark recovered quickly, a cocky grin returning to his face. "Look, man. If Jessica wants to be with me, that's her choice. You can't force her to stay with you." "Maybe, but you're the one who's making it easy for her to leave," I shot back. "You think you're just going to play the hero in this story. You're delusional if you think you're going to be the one she chooses in the end." His smile faded, and I could see a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "I'm not afraid of you, dude. If she's unhappy, it's not my fault. She needs to make her own decisions." "Yeah, but I don't think you realize the consequences of your choices," I said, my anger simmering beneath the surface. "I'm not going to let you walk away unscathed when this blows up in her face. I'll make sure everyone knows how this affair started and what kind of man you really are." Mark's expression shifted from cocky confidence to something darker. He straightened up, trying to regain his composure. "You really think you can threaten me? You have no idea what you're dealing with." I leaned in, closing the distance between us. "No, Mark, you have no idea what you've just walked into. I'm not the one who's going to back down. You've messed with the wrong guy, and I promise you this isn't over." With that, I turned on my heel and walked out, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I had made my point, and I was determined to follow through. I felt a sense of empowerment, a fire igniting in me that I hadn't felt in weeks. I was reclaiming my life, one confrontation at a time. Over the next few days, I devoted myself to getting my life back on track. I started focusing on myself, hitting the gym more frequently, picking up hobbies I had neglected, and reconnecting with friends who had been supportive through this ordeal. I even started exploring options for counseling, not just to deal with the fallout of my marriage, but to help me understand my emotions and how to move forward. But even amid this newfound clarity, the emotional weight of betrayal still lingered. I continued to think about Jessica, about our life together, and the moments that were now tainted by her lies. It was challenging to navigate those feelings while trying to maintain my resolve. One night while sitting at home, I received a text from Jessica. "Can we talk?" It was simple, yet it sent a shiver down my spine. I debated ignoring it, but part of me was curious. I wanted to know what she had to say after everything that had happened. I took a deep breath, my heart racing as I typed out my response. "What do you want to talk about?" The reply came almost instantly. "Please, just give me a chance to explain. I'm really sorry about everything." I felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to hear her out to understand her perspective, but another part screamed that I had already been through enough. Still, it was clear that I couldn't avoid this conversation forever. Fine, I typed back. Let's meet tomorrow. As I hit send, I felt a mixture of dread and anticipation. Tomorrow would be the moment of truth. Either she would come clean and try to make amends, or I would have to finally accept the reality that our marriage was truly over. Either way, I knew I had to prepare myself for whatever was about to unfold. This was a pivotal moment, and I would need to be ready to face whatever she had to say. The next day felt like an eternity. I spent the entire morning pacing around my apartment, mentally rehearsing what I would say to Jessica. Would I give her another chance? Would I allow her to convince me that things could somehow go back to normal? Deep down, I knew those thoughts were naive, but part of me clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, we could salvage something from the wreckage. When the time came to meet, I chose a small cafe that had become our go-to spot when we were still in good terms. It felt surreal to be back in that familiar setting under such strained circumstances. I arrived early, sitting at a table in the corner, trying to gather my thoughts and calm the whirlwind of emotions battling inside me. When Jessica walked in, I noticed the way she hesitated at the door, scanning the room before finally locking eyes with me. She looked different, almost fragile, her shoulders slumped and her face devoid of the usual confidence. I waved her over and she approached slowly, taking a seat across from me. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, her voice quiet and shaky. "Let's just get this over with," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. I didn't want to show her any weakness. I needed to stay strong. Jessica nodded, biting her lip as she searched for words. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about everything that's happened." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "And what conclusions have you arrived at?" "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I messed up. I didn't mean to hurt you, but I felt so lost. Mark made me feel alive again, like I could breathe. You have to understand that." My heart sank at her words. "So this is about feeling alive. You think cheating is a solution. You had all of that with me, Jess. We were happy once." I know," she pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. "But over time, I felt like we were just going through the motions. I didn't know how to express that to you. I thought I could find a way to break free without ruining everything." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You didn't just break free, you shattered everything," I said, my anger rising again. "You didn't just hurt me, you hurt yourself too. If you wanted to talk, I would have listened. I would have done anything to help you." "I didn't think you would," she replied, her voice breaking. "I thought you would just dismiss my feelings like always. But I see now how wrong I was, and I'm so sorry. I never wanted to lose you. Do you even understand the pain you've caused me?" I shot back, my voice rising slightly. "You threw away our life together for a fleeting thrill. You chose to betray me, to lie, and you think saying sorry will make everything okay." She looked down, shame washing over her face. "I know words can't fix this, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want to try to make it right. I'll do whatever it takes." I paused, my heart warring with my head. Part of me wanted to believe her, to hope that she could change, but I also knew that trust was not something that could be easily rebuilt. "What do you want from me, Jessica?" I asked, my voice softer now. "I want us to go to couples counseling," she said, looking up at me with pleading eyes. "I want to work through this together. I know I messed up, but I believe we can still fix our marriage if we try." I sighed, feeling the weight of her words. The thought of couples counseling was daunting. It felt like we were trying to patch up something that had been irreparably shattered. "And what about Mark? Are you willing to cut ties with him completely?" "Yes, I'll do it, I promise," she said, her eyes wide with sincerity. "I know it won't be easy, but I want to put everything into making this work. I love you and I want to fight for us." Her admission hit me like a freight train. I had spent so long feeling betrayed, angry, and heartbroken that hearing her say she loved me felt foreign. Could I really open myself up again to someone who had hurt me so deeply? "I need time to think," I replied, trying to suppress the conflicting emotions swirling within me. "This isn't something I can just brush off. You broke my trust, and that's not easily repaired." "I understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll give you as much time as you need. Just please don't shut me out completely. I want to fight for us." As I looked into her eyes, I saw a glimmer of the woman I had fallen in love with, buried beneath the wreckage of her choices. But I also saw the weight of what had transpired, the scars that would linger long after this conversation. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again the way I did," I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. "But I can't pretend I don't still care about you. Just understand that this is going to take time, a lot of time." Jessica nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'll wait, and I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you that I can change. I just hope it's not too late." As we sat there in the cafe, the world outside continued on, oblivious to the storm brewing. Within us, I felt exhausted, both from the conversation and the emotional roller coaster I had been riding ever since I discovered the affair. Finally, we parted ways with a tentative sense of hope mixed with uncertainty. The road ahead would be difficult, and I couldn't help but wonder if I was making a mistake. But for the first time since everything had fallen apart, I felt like I was taking a step forward, however small it might be. I needed to think about my next steps, about whether I was ready to embark on this journey of healing or if I should let go entirely. I still had questions, still felt the weight of betrayal on my heart, but in that moment, I knew I had opened a door to the possibility of rebuilding. It would be a long and arduous path, but maybe it was one worth taking. In the days following our conversation, I found myself in a constant state of reflection. I replayed every moment, every word Jessica had said, and every emotion that had surged through me. It felt surreal to think about the possibility of reconciliation after everything that had happened, but there was a part of me that didn't want to give up entirely. As the weeks went by, I made it a point to keep communication open. Jessica was diligent about reaching out, and I could see her trying to demonstrate her commitment to change. She started attending therapy sessions on her own, which I appreciated, and she reached out to friends for support in making amends. It was a small step, but it showed me that she was serious about wanting to fix things. Eventually, we went to our first counseling session together. I was nervous, unsure of what to expect, and it felt strange sitting across from a stranger who would be guiding us through our pain. But once we began talking, I found it surprisingly cathartic. The therapist encouraged us to express our feelings honestly, and it was liberating to voice my hurt, confusion, and anger without fear of judgment. Jessica listened intently, her face a mix of regret and determination as I laid bare the emotional toll that her betrayal had taken on me. The therapist helped us navigate the complexities of our relationship, urging us to communicate openly and work through the hurt together. For the first time, I felt like we were making progress, even if it was slow. We tackled the hard conversations, discussing the roots of Jessica's unhappiness and my own shortcomings. It was uncomfortable, but it opened my eyes to the fact that relationships are complex, and often both parties have a role to play in the dysfunction. I began to understand her feelings of being trapped, and I recognized areas where I could improve myself. But it wasn't easy. There were moments when I felt overwhelmed by anger, even in therapy. The memories of her infidelity would come flooding back, and I struggled to reconcile the love I still felt for her with the betrayal I had endured. I often questioned whether I could truly forgive her, but Jessica was patient. She took the brunt of my frustration, absorbing my feelings while trying to prove her commitment to change. Slowly but surely, we began to rebuild. Each session brought new insights and realizations, and I found myself reconnecting with the person I had fallen in love with. Jessica shared her fears and desires, and I learned to listen without immediately jumping to conclusions. It was in these moments that I realized that our connection was not entirely lost. It had simply been buried beneath the weight of lies. As summer approached, I began to feel a renewed sense of hope. We started planning small outings together, rediscovering the joy in our relationship that had been overshadowed by pain. It felt strange at first, like we were fumbling through an awkward dance, but every shared laugh and moment of vulnerability helped create a foundation for healing. However, I also made it clear that I wasn't going to stay in a situation that felt toxic. I set boundaries, expressing what I needed to feel secure in the relationship. Jessica respected that, and I appreciated her willingness to engage in this difficult dialogue. We started to establish a new normal, one built on honesty and openness, something we had both desperately needed. But as the months passed, I began to realize that healing wasn't linear. There were days when I felt like we were making great strides and others when the shadows of mistrust crept back in. I would momentarily catch myself replaying the events of her betrayal, and the pain would resurface. It was a constant reminder of what we were fighting against, and it kept me grounded in the reality of our situation. One evening, after an especially difficult therapy session, I sat outside on our porch alone, staring out into the night. The stars twinkled above, and I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. I had come so far, yet the journey ahead remained uncertain. I needed to confront the possibility that even with all the hard work, things could still fall apart. It was then that Jessica came outside and sat beside me. She didn't speak at first, just placed her hand on my back, a simple gesture that offered comfort. "I know this has been hard on you," she said softly, "and I understand if you're still struggling to forgive me. I'll never stop trying to prove that I can be the wife you deserve." I turned to face her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. "I'm trying too, Jess, but I need you to know that it's going to take time. I can't pretend everything is okay all at once." "I understand," she replied, her voice steady, "and I'll be here ready to fight for us whatever it takes." In that moment I realized that while the scars from her betrayal would always be a part of me, they didn't have to define us. We had the power to reshape our narrative, to take the pieces of our shattered relationship and build something new. It wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to try, for both of us. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the horizon, I understood that resilience is born from struggle. I had learned that love is not just about the good times, but also about navigating the darkness together. The road ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt cautiously optimistic about the future. We were rebuilding, slowly but surely, and I hoped that the foundation we were laying would be strong enough to withstand the tests of time. In the end, I understood that love is a choice, and for now, I was choosing to believe in the possibility of redemption.